I still remember the way my son looked at me that morning. Not with fear, not with anger, but with a kind of quiet confusion, like the world he trusted had started to turn on itself. He stood there, one sock on, the other dangling from his. Little fingers staring at the kitchen doorway where she had just stormed out, her words echoing in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. "Don't talk to him like that," she'd hissed at me. "You're scaring him, again." I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even speaking. I had only looked at her, not in anger, but in disbelief, because 2 minutes earlier she'd been accusing me of forgetting to sign his school permission slip. And I had it in my hand the whole time, signed, on time, like always. But this wasn't about the slip. It hadn't been about the slip for months. I bent down to help him with the other sock, brushing a hand over his tiny ankle. His skin was cool. I felt his pulse thump lightly under my fingertips. That's when I realized mine was racing. I was losing something. I didn't know what to call it yet. My grip? My ground? My identity? It was like standing on a frozen lake and hearing it crack under you, but no one else around seems to notice. They're just skating by, smiling, pretending the sun won't rise tomorrow with a jagged hole beneath their feet. That night, after, I tucked him in, her absence like a silent scream down the hallway. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning slow circles, the hum of it masking the war in my chest. I wasn't the man she said I was. I knew that. God, I knew that. But somehow, her words, they'd gotten out into the world, into courtrooms, into her therapist's office, into her friend's wine night whispers. He's controlling. He manipulates through silence. He's emotionally unsafe. I wanted to scream, but instead I swallowed it like glass, again and again. I had never raised my voice in front of our son, never laid a hand on her, never even slammed a door. But what do you do when someone's weapon isn't a fist, but a story? And the story gets more real each time it's told? She filed for divorce last summer. I didn't fight it, not because I agreed, but because I didn't want my son to grow up watching two people he loved destroy each other. I really thought, if I stayed quiet, if I played fair, she'd see that I wasn't the enemy, that we could raise him in peace. But then the custody papers came, and my knees buckled. Sole legal custody awarded to the mother due to the father's toxic behavioral patterns. I remember dropping the envelope onto the kitchen floor and staring at the ink like it might rearrange itself. If I blinked hard enough, toxic, she had called me toxic, and somehow that word, just 5 letters, weighed more than everything I had ever done right. I was granted supervised visitation every other Sunday. Like a criminal, like a threat. And the worst part? My son had stopped looking me in the eyes, like he was trying to understand something that didn't make sense in his 5-year-old world. Like someone had told him a story about me, a scary one, and he was trying to find out if it was true. The visits were cold, sterile. A woman with a clipboard sat in the corner of the room while I built Lego towers and made ridiculous animal voices just to make him laugh. He did, sometimes, but then he'd glance toward the woman or toward the door, as if someone invisible was always watching. I started noticing bruises, not on his skin, but on his spirit. Things he used to love, he avoided. He said less, smiled less, flinched. When I offered a hug, like touch had become complicated. One day, after he knocked over a cup of juice, he looked up at me with wide, wet eyes and said, "Don't tell Mommy I was bad." My heart stopped. I knelt beside him, held his hand in mine, and whispered, "You're not bad. Ever." But inside, I felt the floor cracking beneath me again. What was she telling him? Who was she teaching him to fear? That night I sat in my car. For hours, long after dropping him off. It was raining. A kind of rain that drummed on the windshield like time running out. I stared at the house, at the soft yellow light from his bedroom window, wondering if he was okay, wondering if he was scared, wondering what kind of story she was spinning between bedtime stories and whispered goodnights. Something was wrong. I felt it in my bones, but I didn't know yet that the worst was still to come, that the story she'd told everyone else was nothing compared to the one she was telling him. She wasn't always like this. I think that's what still messes with my head the most. There was a time when we'd lie in bed, knees touching, and she'd whisper things like, "I feel safest when I'm with you." She used to tuck her head beneath my chin and trace invisible patterns on my chest with her fingers. Back then, she called me her anchor, her calm in the chaos. I believed her. I wanted to be that man, not just for her, but for myself. After my own father left when I was 10, I swore I'd be the kind of man who stayed, who listened, who didn't make love feel like something you had to earn. We met in college, Boston, mid-October, leaves like fire falling around us. She was magnetic, a little intense, a little broken, but brilliant. When she looked at you, it felt like she saw things other people missed. She once told me that my quiet made her feel safe, that I didn't fill silence just to avoid it, that I understood things without needing to say them out loud. It was all true then, but after our son was born, something changed. At first, I chalked it up to sleep deprivation, the tidal wave of new parenthood. She was exhausted, anxious, always 2 steps away from tears or fury. I tried to take the night shifts. I learned how to swaddle, to rock him, with just the right rhythm, to hum the lullaby her mother used to sing. I brought her coffee in bed, left love notes on the bathroom mirror, but she started resenting me anyway. "You make it look easy," she said once, tears in her eyes. "It's not supposed to be easy." I didn't know what to say. Was I supposed to struggle more, just to make her feel less alone? It got worse when I went back to work. Every time I came home, there was a new accusation waiting for me, not of cheating, not of anything concrete, just this vague sense that I wasn't doing enough, that I was too calm, too disconnected, too emotionally absent. She used words like withholding, dismissive, cold. But I was none of those things. I was just tired, quiet, careful, trying to keep the peace in a house where peace had turned into a foreign language. Still, I stayed. I tried harder. We did therapy. 2, maybe 3 different counselors. She talked. I listened. She cried. I held her. But slowly, I realized that nothing I did would ever be enough, because her pain had turned inward, then outward, then toward me. And when she started turning it toward our son, I remember the first time I saw it. He was maybe 4. She wanted him to eat broccoli. He didn't want to. He said it made his mouth taste like tree. It was a funny, harmless moment, the kind you're supposed to laugh at and move on. But she didn't laugh. She leaned in, low and sharp, and said, "Stop being dramatic. You're not a baby anymore." His face crumpled, not from the words, but the ice in her voice. I picked him up and said I'd handle dinner. Later that night, she accused me of undermining her. Side I always took his side, that I was turning him into a soft little puppet. I told myself it was a bad day, a phase, stress, but the moments piled up, quiet and bruising, little things. Her rolling her eyes when he cried, her sighing like he was a burden, her disappearing into her phone for hours, then snapping when he asked for attention. And still, I stayed because I thought I could absorb it, that if I stayed steady, I could protect him. That love was armor, but now I see I wasn't protecting him. I was normalizing it, I was teaching him that love comes with tension. That silence is safety. That fear is familiar. That kills me. Because now, when I look at him, I see a boy trying to understand two very different versions of the same man. The one he remembers, and the one she's describing. One night, during a supervised visit, he asked me something that made my breath hitch. "Daddy, did you make Mommy sad forever?" I couldn't answer right away. My throat closed. I looked into his eyes. My eyes, really. The same shape and shade, and I saw how hard he was trying to hold on to love in a world full of confusion. I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, but I didn't, because I'd started to realize something darker, something I hadn't been ready to face. This wasn't about sadness. It wasn't even about me, Dot. It was about control. And she had learned how to use our son to keep it. What I didn't know yet was just how far she'd go. There's a look kids give when they don't feel safe, but can't say it, Dot. It's not obvious. It's not the kind of thing you'd catch in a photo or on a home video. It's small, quick, like the flicker of a shadow across their face before they remember to smile. I started seeing it more often, in the way he'd glance over his shoulder when I picked him up for our visits, in how he clung to me just a second too long before letting go, in the way he flinched at loud noises, not random ones, but ones that reminded him of doors slamming shut. The supervised visits were supposed to make everything safe. That's the word they used, safe. But safety doesn't come from someone watching with a clipboard. It comes from being held without tension. It comes from being heard without being used. One afternoon, I brought a drawing book. He used to love to color, especially animals. His favorite was the wolf. He said they were strong, but lonely. I asked him once if that made him sad. He just shrugged. That day, he flipped to a blank page and started drawing a house with a huge crack down the middle. I asked him what it was. He said, "It's where the yelling goes." I smiled gently. "And what's this room over here?" He paused and said, "That's where I hide." Something broke in me then, quietly, without ceremony. Just a small, final crack in the version of reality I had been clinging to. And once I saw it, really saw it, I couldn't unsee it anymore. The stories she told the court, they were just the beginning. At home, she was telling him different ones. Ones I wasn't allowed to hear. One night, I picked him up, and he refused to eat anything I brought. I'd packed all his favorites, the sandwich with the crust cut off, apple slices, juice box. But he shook his head and said, "Mommy said you put poison in it. Double quotes poison. I sat there, stunned. I felt like the air had been pulled out of the room. "Hey, buddy, why would she say that?" He didn't answer. He looked at the social worker, then down at the floor. His little hands were clenched in his lap, shaking. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I wrapped the sandwich up, tucked it away, and asked if he wanted to color instead. He nodded. He drew a forest this time, with wolves. Always the wolves. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, trying to stitch together all the little things I'd ignored, all the signs that had come and gone like smoke in my rearview mirror. There was the time she texted me in the middle of the night, furious, claiming I'd made him cry during our call. But when I checked the call log, it was under 3 minutes, and he'd said nothing but, "Hi, Daddy. Mommy says I can't talk long." There was the drawing he brought home from kindergarten, a family picture. Her, him, their dog, and a big black scribble where I should have been. When I asked, he said, "Mommy said you moved to the clouds." There was the time I showed up to the pickup spot, and she told me he didn't want to come because he was afraid of how I look when I'm mad. I hadn't raised my voice in months, years even. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a pattern. A strategy? A slow erasure of me from his life, not by law, but by fear. And the worst part? She did it with a smile. In court, she was poised, calm, articulate, said all the right words minus trauma-informed, protective parenting, emotional boundaries. She weaponized therapy language like it was a script, like she was playing the role of the conscious mother perfectly. But behind closed doors, she was doing exactly what she accused me of, manipulating, gaslighting, controlling, not me anymore, him. And somehow, she'd made everyone believe the opposite. It's like watching a house burn down from the inside, while everyone outside compliments the architecture. They see the white picket fence, the hand-labeled mason jars in the kitchen, the smile at drop-off. They don't smell the smoke. They don't hear the coughing from behind the walls. But I do, because I live there. And now, my son does too. Something had to change. But I knew I couldn't fight her the way I wanted to. Not in court, not in arguments. She had already made me the villain in everyone else's story. So I started to listen more closely. I watched. I waited. I took notes. I studied the cracks in her story. I didn't say a word, but inside, I was preparing. Because soon, I'd find out just how deep her story went, and who else she'd convinced to believe it. The moment I knew I had to stop trusting the system came during a parent-teacher conference at my son's elementary school. It was supposed to be routine. His first-grade teacher, Ms. Leclerc, had scheduled time for both parents. But when I arrived, her expression shifted slightly, polite, wary. "Mr. Daniels," she said, shaking my hand. "I wasn't sure you'd be coming. That surprised me." "Why?" She hesitated, then pulled out a small folder and said, "There's been some confusion about who's involved in his schooling." I sat down slowly. My heart started that tight, crawling thump again. She opened the folder. My name wasn't listed anywhere on the emergency contact sheet, not even in the parent section. It was blank where it should have said Father Jonathan Daniels. Under authorized pickup, only her name and her sister's were written. I swallowed. I've had supervised visitation for almost a year now, but I never gave up parental rights. Ms. Leclerc gave me a soft, cautious look. "That's not what we were told." I forced a breath out through my nose. "What exactly were you told?" She looked down, and when she spoke, it was clinical, like she was reciting a memo. "Father is emotionally unstable and not permitted unsupervised contact. Please do not involve or inform him of school matters without legal confirmation." It felt like the floor fell out from under me. My mouth went dry. I don't remember the rest of the meeting. I nodded at the right times, thanked her, left quietly. Outside, I sat in my car again. Same rain tapping on the roof, same helpless grip on the steering wheel. But this time, something cracked in a different place. She hadn't just convinced people I was dangerous. She'd made me invisible. And that's when I realized she wasn't using our son to punish me. She was using him to erase me, piece by piece, memory by memory, removing me from his reality like I was just some bad dream. That never really happened. I imagined her sitting with him at night, gently rewriting the script. Daddy's not coming back. Daddy's not safe. Daddy didn't want to stay. And the worst part? He was starting to believe it. I saw it in his posture, his tone, in the way he stopped calling me Dad and started calling me Jonathan once, like he was testing a word she'd given him. I didn't confront her. I didn't go to court, not yet. I knew by then that rage would only feed her story. Instead, I started documenting everything. I began collecting every text, every voice message, every small inconsistency in her timelines. I kept a private journal of our supervised visits, cataloging what he said, what he did, when he flinched, when he laughed. I wrote it all down, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed the truth, and because someday he would need it too. One night, after he drew another broken house, I asked softly, "Do you ever feel scared when you're home?" He looked at me for a long time, and he said, "No, but sometimes I have to be quiet so Mommy doesn't get mad." I asked, "What happens when she gets mad?" He pressed the crayon harder against the paper until it broke. "She says, make her tired." That night, I filed a formal request to reopen the custody agreement. I didn't tell anyone, not even my sister, who'd been urging me to fight back for months. I didn't want to fight her. I wanted to fight for him, so I hired a new attorney, someone quiet, methodical, who specialized in emotional abuse cases and parental alienation. We started reviewing the visitation logs, school records, discrepancies in the psychological evaluations. We found a string of unusual notations, repeated school absences without cause, claims of emotional distress that never lined up with real events. There was a pattern. It was subtle, but it was there. And then there was the voicemail, buried deep in my archive, a message she'd left by accident. One of those butt dial recordings that ran longer than it should have. At first, it was just background noise. Her voice, talking on speakerphone to someone I couldn't identify. But then I heard her laugh and say, "He still thinks he's getting custody. Let him waste his money. I've got every door locked before he even sees the building." I saved that audio. I sent it to my attorney, and I waited. Not in anger, not in desperation, but with quiet, steady fire, because I had finally stopped asking for fairness and started preparing for truth. What I didn't know, not yet, was how deep the lies really went, or how close I was to discovering something that would change everything. It started with a simple question. My lawyer, a woman named Kendra, sharp-eyed and soft-spoken, asked me, "Have you ever looked into her medical records?" I blinked. "No. Why would I?" "She's claimed in court filings that she's under psychiatric care," she said, flipping through her folder. "She used those statements to limit your visitation, but the records she submitted were selective, cropped, too perfect." Kendra leaned back in her chair. "I think she's hiding something." I felt a wave of unease wash over me. For a long time, I'd been telling myself that maybe this was all just trauma, misguided protection. I didn't want to believe she was cruel, not the woman I once loved, not the mother of my child. But what if this wasn't just pain? What if it was a plan? Kendra filed a motion for disclosure. Court-authorized access to her psychological evaluations, therapy transcripts, medication history. It took weeks. Red tape. Resistance. Her lawyer fought it with everything they had. Called it an invasion of privacy. Claimed we were weaponizing her mental health. But the judge approved it, narrowly, under seal. And that's when everything started to come apart. The documents came in slowly, pages at a time. At first, I didn't even want to read them. But Kendra called me late one night, her voice quiet but hard. "I think you need to see this." The first thing I noticed was the diagnosis. Borderline personality disorder, mixed with traits of histrionic personality disorder. Not uncommon, not shameful, but serious, especially untreated. But deeper in the notes were the parts that made my blood run cold. Patient exhibits manipulative behavior toward perceived threats to emotional stability, including her child's father. Recurring use of false narrative framing to maintain control of interpersonal dynamics. Signs of projection, especially regarding accusations of emotional neglect and control. I kept reading page after page. She'd admitted things, told therapists that she felt like our son loved his father more, and that she needed to rebalance the power dynamic. She said she wanted to make him feel what I felt all those years, Small, voiceless, invisible. She had even rehearsed scenarios to emotionally disqualify me in the eyes of school officials and the court. Her words. Rehearsed scenarios. It wasn't pain that it was designed. And for a year, maybe longer, I had been defending myself from ghosts she'd created, lies wrapped in just enough truth to sound believable. But the most devastating art wasn't about me. It was what she wrote about him. Our son. He's starting to repeat his father's tone. It makes me feel erased. Sometimes I pull away from him because it hurts too much to see that face. I'm afraid I'm going to lose him if I don't keep control of how he sees the world. Those words. How he sees the world. She wasn't just telling stories about me. She was curating his reality, altering his memory, weaponizing his love, not just to punish me, but to soothe her own terror of being left behind. I felt sick, like my organs were folding in on themselves. My hands trembled as I held the papers. I had never hated anyone before. Not really. Not even my father when he left. But in that moment, I felt something dangerously close. Because this wasn't madness. This was strategy masked as suffering. The next day, we filed an emergency motion to review custody. This time, we had the documentation, the transcripts. The pattern of manipulation, the contradictory statements. We submitted reports from teachers and supervisors. Behavioral assessments showing increased anxiety in our son during transitions. Even a pediatric note suggesting environmental stress may be contributing to his sleep disruption and stomach pain. The judge agreed to hear it. A full review. Not just of custody, but of her conduct. And I didn't tell her. I didn't warn her. I didn't confront her. I didn't send a single message. Because confrontation had never led to change with her. Only more war, more spin. But I did notice something odd during our next visit. She was quieter. Less polished. Our son came in wearing mismatched socks. He hadn't eaten. He clung to me like he used to, but this time he didn't let go. When I sat him down to draw, he didn't pick up the crayons. Instead, he looked at me, eyes wide and wet. "Daddy," he whispered, "did I make everything bad?" I hugged him tight, pressing my face into his hair, breathing in the faint scent of shampoo and something older. Fear, maybe. Memory. Grief. "No," I whispered. "You didn't make anything bad. I promise." I held him there, the clock ticking too loudly behind us, the social worker pretending not to watch. And I knew this wasn't the end. Not yet, because something had shifted in her. And I could feel it in the air. A tremor before the collapse. I didn't expect to see her that day. She wasn't supposed to be at the school pickup. The court had made it clear we were to keep exchanges separate, supervised. But there she was, standing near the playground fence, sunglasses low on her nose, arms crossed tight against the wind. Our son saw her first. He froze, dropped my hand. I crouched beside him. "It's okay," I said gently. "You're with me right now." He looked at me, then back at her. His face had that expression. Again, like he was waiting for an earthquake. When she walked toward us, it wasn't with fury. It was something worse. A practiced call. "Jonathan," she said smoothly, "we need to talk." I didn't answer. I kept my hand on our son's shoulder and nodded toward the school monitor. "This isn't the place." She smiled, brittle. "At the edges. Don't act like you're the reasonable one now." There it was, the mask slipping. She stepped closer. Her voice dipped low, for my ears only. "You think they're going to believe you? After everything I've documented? You're already toxic in their eyes. You're a story I've already told." I stared at her, not blinking. Then I said it. Slowly, quietly, with no emotion. "I've read your therapy transcripts." Her breath caught, just barely. "What?" You recorded everything, I said. Just not for the reason you think. For a moment, she just stood there, eyes darting, calculating. She laughed, high-pitched, hollow. Those are protected documents. You're violating. You submitted them, I said flatly. To the court, remember? Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She tried to recover. You're twisting everything. You always twist things. That's what you do. You twist. Our son was looking up at her now, eyes wide. Mommy? He said softly, and something cracked. She crouched. Too fast, grabbing his arms a little too tight. Baby, listen to me. Daddy's confused. Okay? He's saying weird things. But you know Mommy always tells the truth, right? You know that. He didn't answer. His bottom lip trembled. She turned to me, her eyes wild now. You don't. Get to take him from me. He's all I have. Her voice shook. You took everything else. No, I said. You gave it away. And for the first time, I think she heard herself. Really heard it. Her knees gave. She sank to the curb, arms wrapped around her own ribs, like she was holding herself together by force. Her sunglasses fell, clattering to the pavement. People were watching now. Teachers, other parents, the pickup line frozen in motion. But I didn't care, because the boy between us, our boy, was standing silent, watching everything, and I knew this wasn't about courtrooms anymore. This was about what he would remember. I knelt beside him again, met his eyes. You okay? He nodded. Want to come with me now? He looked at her. She wasn't speaking, just rocking slightly, breathing hard through her teeth. And he took my hand, and we walked away. That night, I got a call from her sister. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since the early days of our separation, when she stayed on her side of the fire line. But now her voice was shaking. She's not well, she said. She's unraveling. And I think you were right. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow, because nothing about this was a win. There were no victories when a child has to unlearn a version of the world carefully, constructed to keep him afraid, but it was a turning point. The court date was approaching. We had the reports, the testimony, the pattern. But more than anything, we had the shift. The unraveling had started. And when the walls she'd built finally came down, we'd both see what she'd buried beneath them. The courtroom was colder than I remembered, not in temperature, but in feeling. Like a vacuum had sucked out the humanity, leaving only quiet rules and careful language. My palms were sweating. I kept wiping them on my pants, steadying my breath. Sat across from me, hair, perfectly done. Dark suit, a look of poise that had always fooled people. But not today, not anymore, because the story had shifted. The judge reviewed our filings and turned to her. She didn't speak at first, just blinked too fast. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering something, but her eyes were distant. Had read the records. They had listened to the voicemail. They had seen the drawings, our son's strange, haunted depictions of the angry room, of the broken house, of the wolves with nowhere to hide. They had listened to the pediatricians' concerns, the school's observations, the therapist's hesitant but firm assessment of emotional triangulation and narrative control. She was asked to speak. She tried, but her voice cracked. I only ever wanted to protect him, she said, her gaze flicking toward me for the briefest moment. I didn't mean. I wasn't trying to. The words dried up. There were no more stories to tell. Just silence. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't shame her. He just stated what was now, finally, obvious, that the child's emotional well-being had been compromised, not by physical danger, but by persistent psychological manipulation. I was granted joint legal custody. A transition plan was established. one designed to slowly rebuild trust. Not between me and her, that bridge had long burned, but between me and my son, the little boy who had learned to be careful with love, who'd been taught that safety had sides, and his father's was the wrong one. I picked him up from school. That Friday, no monitor, no clipboard, just me. He walked toward me with slow steps, backpack bouncing. I knelt down to his level. "Hey," I said, "how was your day?" He didn't answer right away, but then he wrapped his arms around my neck, hard. I held him for what felt like years. And when he finally pulled back, he whispered something into my ear, something I'll never forget. "Daddy, it doesn't feel scary anymore." It took everything in me not to cry right there on the sidewalk. I wanted to tell him the truth, that love shouldn't be scary, that families break sometimes, but love shouldn't bruise, that the world had failed him in more ways than he should ever have known at 6 years old. But I didn't say anything. I just held his hand, and we walked to the car. That night, we sat on the floor and built a Lego city. Just the two of us. No watchers. No fear. No invisible stories. And somewhere between stacking bricks and telling wolf jokes, he smiled like he used to. Like the boy I remembered. The boy I thought I'd lost. I still don't hate her. I can single quotes T.hate is just another kind of attachment. And I've spent too long letting her shape my story. I've let go of needing justice to look like revenge. What I wanted was truth. What I needed was him. And now, piece by piece, we're finding our way back to each other. There are still hard days. There will be more. Healing is messy. Love even more so. But at least now, we're writing the story together. One page at a time. Share. Your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Click the video on the screen, and I'll see you there.